The Vine Trust from Bonaire, Scotland and Scripture Union Peru help some of the world's most desperately deprived children. In Amazonia, Earth's last great wilderness, they also created a unique floating jungle health service for 100,000 people, manned by local staff and volunteers from Britain and the US. The new health service was reinforced by a newly refurbished state-of-the-art hospital ship, the Amazon Hope II, and both have been recommissioned by the Princess Royal. Another first for the partnership was making medical history on the new vessel, complex eye surgery deep in the jungle. A Scottish work party is building a new home for street kids in Kusi, in the high Andes, on the site of a devastating earthquake. Then history repeated itself when an even more destructive earthquake, measuring 8 on the Richter scale, devastated coastal Peru. The Vine Trust and Union Biblica were quick to react, providing water and food for the children. It is almost 4 weeks since the earthquake. Willie McPherson arrives in Ica and is briefed by Paul Clark. Union Biblica Peru set up a much-needed information bureau in the main square, now cleared of corpses.
The problem we're facing here is one of credibility, and there's an assumption on the part of many people that our desire in helping children, short and long term, is that we've come here to steal them for sex rackets in Europe, and also to take them away to sell body parts, because those are things that these people have experienced in the past, and there's an underlying assumption that that we're up to something like that. So it's very important for us, for Scripture Union and the Vine Trust together, to have an official and formal link with the government, with the court system, and also with a government agency that looks after the problem of the poor. So these 4 people working together are what we need as a backing, so that when we find an abandoned boy to take to our home on a permanent basis in Ica, the people won't say, a child is being stolen, they're going to steal his eyes or his kidneys or whatever. And so that's the reason for this information center. The case of corneas, we know that it's being done by foreign doctors because we don't do that kind of transplants here in Peru. We had a friend, an American doctor, who came here on a Fulbright scholarship, and he was to work in one of the very poor shantytown areas of Lima, and he was here a couple months, and he said, I can't take this any longer, I'm going back to the United States, and he left. The reason was, every morning he'd leave his car and walk up into the shantytown. The people all scream and say, here he comes, and they're all run and grab their children, run away from him and hide. They say, he's coming to take our eyes.
In Ica province, the Vine Trust and SU Peru have already set up 7 feeding centers for the vulnerable young victims of the terrible earthquake.
There's some pork in it, there's some onion, there's definitely some spices, and there's some yuca. It costs less than 6 pence to provide a full meal for the kids. 1,410 children are receiving 2 meals a day, and basically these kids are living in the aftermath of what can only really be described like a war zone.
A heavy army presence is essential to keep the unstable situation under control during the emergency.
It's like a bomb site. I'm sure the older generation of people who have lived through wars or even terror in places like Northern Ireland, when your day starts normally and ends in tragedy in a way that you could never imagine, or what's happening in places like Baghdad or wherever, But those tragedies tend to be linked with terror rather than the awesome power of a natural disaster. Goodness, it just makes you all the more appreciative of the days that you have. You've got to live your life to the full because, you know, none of us know the moment.
The government still haven't supplied any sanitation, electricity or food for the kids. But somehow, in the midst of this nightmare, the children are kept amused by entertainers from SU Peru.
It's now a month since the earthquake and many agencies now are packing up because the emergency has passed. But we're going to try and support these programs through to the end of this year and maybe a little bit into next year. It's just very, very sad to see people who started off with so little now having to get by with even less. What you're beginning to see is that people are building these little huts around some of the tents that some of them have been given. I noticed a house with a tent inside. People are still living in the tent, but they're building their straw huts around them. So over the next 10, 15, 20 years, they'll get a few bricks and they'll start to build. And like the shanty towns of Lima, they'll gradually build themselves a home.
As life in Ica and Pisco slowly returns to its unique form of normality, Callum Munro diverts to Lima to take the Andean Hope on its perilous 800-mile journey over the highest roads in the world, 16,000 feet up in the high Andes. Icy roads, shining path terrorists, violent drug traffickers, intimidation from the military and armed blockades manned by furious coca farmers threatening to torch any vehicle foolish enough to try breaking through their ranks. But this is well off the tourist trail and the only route they can take.